In little more than half a century, the age of nuclear weapons has witnessed the manufacture of more than 125,000 nuclear warheads. Nuclear weapons testing has resulted in over 2,000 nuclear detonations in the atmosphere, in space, underwater, and underground. The 2000 NPT Review Conference resulted in a number of encouraging commitments, not least the quote-unquote unequivocal undertakings by the nuclear weapon states to accomplish the total elimination of their nuclear arsenals. But a scant 2 years later, we have moved sharply away from those commitments. Moreover, some nuclear weapon states have reversed direction by stressing the continuing value of nuclear weapons in defense of national security interests, including discussion of the feasibility of developing new types of nuclear weapons and scenarios for the use of nuclear weapons against non-nuclear weapon states. The present situation cannot be sustained because the possession of nuclear weapons by any state is a constant stimulus to other states to acquire them.
We still have, as was mentioned this morning, thousands of strategic nuclear weapons left over from the Cold War, 6,000 in each of the US and Russian arsenals. I don't know anybody at this point at any place on the political spectrum who argues that we should be sustaining these kinds of high levels. And that is why I welcomed very much the Moscow Treaty that was signed by Presidents Bush and Putin in May, because it is a push to reduce readiness and weapons on operational deployment. However, it has come in for a lot of criticism.
The treaty erodes the very concept of negotiated binding arms control agreements as a means of reducing the nuclear threat and enhancing international security. It provides a misleading public relations cover for a very assertive Bush nuclear posture without reducing future nuclear risks in any substantive way. The treaty does not require the elimination of a single nuclear missile, silo, submarine, bomb, etc. It allows unlimited production and deployment of new nuclear warheads and delivery systems, tactical and strategic. It lacks an agreed definition of what, if anything, is being reduced.
The United States did proceed early on with a nuclear posture review, which changed the very basic way that our nuclear weapons planning and policy is formulated. And what that did was to shift the focus in planning away from the prospect of war with Russia to the ability, and I stress the ability, to respond to new and emerging threats. We also need to rebuild our nuclear weapons infrastructure. In the President's father's administration, the United States shut down its nuclear weapons production facility. We have not made a new nuclear weapon since the President's father's administration.
The traditional debate over new nuclear weapons, which were advanced by the present administration in the Nuclear Posture Review, are pretty straightforward. The argument starts that American forces need to be able to destroy deep underground bunkers and chemical or biological agents, that nuclear weapons are uniquely suited to that task and thus must be developed. The retort from the other side has been new nuclear weapons would undermine anti-nuclear norms, harming non-proliferation and American security.
If your goal is to get rid of all nuclear weapons, fine, you come out one way. That is not where this administration is. What the President said in the news conference is that the United States would reserve the right to respond as appropriate and necessary to any attack on the United States with nuclear, chemical, or biological weapons. That's the thrust of what he said.
Using a nuclear weapon in that way would mean a total departure of the way we saw nuclear weapons thus far. Nuclear weapons were a deterrent. It is clear that the bunker buster would leave the idea of deterrence behind it would be a usable weapon. It would be a weapon like any other weapon that you could use also in an offensive way. But you assign another role to nuclear weapons. The threshold that was there was more than just a technical threshold. It was a deep psychological threshold that has been created by nuclear weapons ever since they were used to such devastating effect in Japan. So from that point of view alone, there is an enormous risk politically and morally in going that way. The impression is created that nuclear weapons are not only there to stay, because I do think that they will not disappear overnight, but also that one starts thinking of totally new uses. Whereas you could have imagined that after the Cold War, we would gradually go the path of reducing not only the number of nuclear weapons, but also of their roles, the world would not understand it.
It does not make sense, either morally or legally, to keep huge nuclear arsenals, to continue to develop new types of nuclear weapons, for instance, mini-nukes that can be more easily used in battlefields, to reserve the right to resume nuclear tests, and to target nuclear weapons on other countries, when global efforts for non-proliferation are advocated and reinforced.
We are concerned about non-proliferation, nuclear non-proliferation, and I think we have to remind that there is an intrinsic message that we are giving to the world, which is that nuclear power are associated with political power, with international power. And on the long range, I'm not talking about what happens in the next few days or years, on the long range, this important message has its effect. And if we don't change this basic message, then the risk of nuclear proliferation will be always there.
Indeed, irrespective of whatever deterrent effect nuclear weapons achieved during the Cold War, they are progressively, in my view, losing their value as a currency of power, particularly in preventing local conflict and in dealing with threats posed by sub-national terrorist groups. Given that the only perceived legitimate use of nuclear weapons is for the ultimate survival of a state, nuclear weapon states should at the very least be able to move faster toward bringing their weapon inventory to a bare minimum.
If you want to go back to the old style of arms control, that's not where we're going. And what we need to do is continue the dialogue and continue the transparency and to get each side to continue reducing its levels of nuclear weapons, but to do so in a manner that brings progress, not adversarial debate. Our view is that we see no need for additional formal agreements on arms reduction. What we need to do is to take both bureaucracies and to ensure that there is a new spirit of transparency in which both sides understand the force levels, policies, and deployments of the other side and their future plans. What we don't need is a return to formalistic, Cold War style, set-piece arms control negotiations which drag on for years and produce no visible result.